Hey, this is Taylor, aka Grows PM. This is a supercut of all the topics we've covered on this channel and in the classes I teach. Being a product manager isn't one size fits all. At a startup, you're basically duct taping stuff together to find product market fit, what resonates with users before the money runs out. At a scaling unicorn, harnessing that chaos and creating growth loops and virality, trying not to break things while millions of users pile in. And at a giant or more traditional firm, you're optimizing at scale, managing politics as much as the features, and any of those little feature changes are going to affect people on a global scale. You're finding tiny percentage gains that move billion-dollar needles that have a lot of risk if you don't do it right. So it's a same title across these different roles, but totally different in how you go about doing that. So let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice with real deliverables and real tools that you might experience out there. 5 questions from Roger Martin. Really, that first part, your winning aspiration, you really just have to choose. Like, what, as a founder, as a company, as a CEO, do you want to do? And then from there, we can flow down that cascade of questions. If you're somewhere where they haven't really chose a winning aspiration and you just exist because you're there, that makes it really hard to be successful. And it's kind of a bit of chaos if you aren't aligned from that top vision of a strategy down to what you do on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't have that rock solid foundation. So that's a bit of a red flag if you're working for a company. I would get out of there if you can, unless they have that clarity on what their winning aspiration is and then in what areas you're going to place. That's going to change more frequently than your winning aspiration because that, for SpaceX changed as well, as they have Starlink spin up and then they have other things that can fuel the revenue so that they're then able to do more things for NASA and even inspiration that they can have new forms of revenue as well that they just haven't done yet, but then they can tweak this to play in a different way. And they can then go through the other parts of that. And then where you get into different pieces of the strategy is what do you need as far as capabilities and systems that are both technology systems and even like different teams and business processes and other things around what is required to do that sort of work. So avoiding the build trap. So this is from Melissa Perry, the product manager, and you'll experience this in a lot of teams where you're just building a lot of features that are requested that are not really connected to the strategy that we are just talking about. We're really trying to connect strategy overall to what we do on a day-to-day basis instead of just getting in this cycle of like building a bunch of features that users often don't end up needing. It's, 20% of those features are used 80% of the time, and the rest cause a lot of trouble because it's difficult to maintain it. It makes it cluttered and it makes it complex, and you end up in this sort of cycle that is really not a fun time for everyone. Or maybe you report up to a different leader in marketing or sales or e-commerce. A lot of them will be like, make me more money. It's like, okay, that's not a great manager, but you want to break that down to different levels. So with Spotify, when you think about it like a product manager, it's like, okay, the money is like downstream and we'll make that. But what we need to do is get people to spend more time listening to music. You want them to spend longer per session. You really need to break it down to these because if you only look at that metric on the right, like it's down 10% or up 10%, but like what are the actual problems and what could we do to then experiment and A/B test different features and work on what we can improve? Some of these companies have very tight connections to those OKRs. And there's a lot of different perspectives on that and how you write them well. Like many of the things, they are poorly implemented in a lot of cases, but having these objectives that you can judge your product and then your performance on can be very powerful and can also be kind of wonky as well. But having some sort of a clear metric that you're trying to make progress on, and then to be able to track that over time and then connect that to the business results and your performance review is basically how that goes. And these are the items we had going from a user all the way to finding product market fit. We covered user research about needs, and needs are the problems and pain in desires that a user experiences. So we're trying to build a product that doesn't just solve a problem, but does so in a way that's meaningful and valuable to the users. Needs can be met or not met by what exists or what you're proposing, and then the emotions around that as well. So you can really redesign a product for different emotions. And there's the before and after too. So you may be frustrated and like lacking clarity now. And what you want is, clear indicators of progress and how you're learning. And then you can design for that. So you can design to keep someone excited. You can see the flow through some of the same kind of stages that you would look at in marketing, from awareness through the choices and decisions in the process and the different touch points there. But even if you bought a new Chromecast or whatever, just signing up and logging in and connecting it to your account and all of the loops that you can get in, there's a lot of pain points out there that are really poorly implemented, even with products that go out to millions of users every day. And I know we can do better. So as the PM, you're the advocate for the customer, and you can really push for a better experience for them. Product market fit. One part of product management is the pitching a startup, creating a pitch deck. You'll hear people talk about pre-product market fit, where you've got sort of an idea, maybe something technical, maybe some standout feature, but they're really trying to find fit and then scale. You don't want to start hiring hundreds and hundreds of people and burning through all that money that you have or borrowed before you really have found that right fit for a customer that you can then sustainably scale. Instagram was originally bourbon. Then they noticed that the only thing that people were using was the photo sharing part of it. So they decided to pivot and completely fit. So it was the same team, the same really back end technology. It's just storing of photos. And then they worked on adding filters and things like that, or really putting on our hats of like being honest about those experiences. And I mean, some of these look a little unhinged, and this one's pretty unhinged, but I really love it. As a PM, it's hard sometimes to get the feedback from users, but there's usually some truth and other information that we can pull from that to learn and use that to make our products better. Product sense is really just that sense of taste and knowledge about what might make a good product. And you've got plenty of skills and that through the things you experience on a day-to-day basis and through your empathy with what's happening in users. And you all have different backgrounds and specialties and knowledge, whether it's design or marketing and other things. And pulling all that together helps you have a point of view for what you think might work. And then you, of course, test it and look at the numbers and everything like that. But building a sense of what could work well using your unique view of the world. There's been a lot of projects when I was a project manager where I barely ever saw the app. And so I wouldn't really have a POV and product sense about that. I was more of managing scope, timeline, and cost without really looking at the product. So with a product manager, you have some of those pieces, especially if there is no project manager, but you also have this view that encompasses all of those things. So definitely having a strong sense instead of just having an engineer lead it, because usually, unless they're one with all of the hats and you're very early in a startup, you should probably have a better connection to the user than just the engineering side and how it is built. You need to connect deeper with the why. Agile, we're really trying to break down the work into chunks that are achievable in a sprint, which usually is 2 weeks, sometimes it's three. It could be whatever, but you have this defined set of weeks where you break it down into different tasks for the development to complete and estimate and prioritize. There's a lot of watch outs with Agile in the term because Agile means flexible. The boomer way of talking about Agile is very annoying, where they're like, oh, let's just be Agile, which means I can forget about all the research you did, forget about what we're saying, and just be like, oh, let's just pivot like really quick. It's like, no, that's not actually what it means. It's actually about a specific way of doing things, about organizing work, about creating user stories connected with what the actual user needs to do so that they can accomplish an objective. It's not just about being casual about what we're creating and having no timelines and being just too flexible. Waterfall, obviously linear and less flexible. They have different structures in Waterfall when they have like gates as you go along in the process that you have to pass, but it is more structured and linear. lean startup where you're looking at building a minimal viable product. The idea around this is trying to figure out what is the minimum you need to build to actually figure out if users are getting value out of your product instead of spending a bunch of time and effort and money building a massive thing when a very simple thing can help you validate what you think about the market and users and then be able to build on top of that. So I'm a certified Scrum product owner. Like you'll see a lot of these. Your companies will pay for your certifications, or you can get them as you try to put some things on your resume and to get a little bit more of a boost in the application process in the places that value that. And Scrum. So coming from rugby, the term Scrum, that's what we're talking about with breaking things down into the fixed length sprints and having those individual roles. So that's when we're talking about the daily stand up and stuff as well. That's kind of the really simple way to manage things where you have the backlog of things to be done, like the tasks you're working on to do, and then the ones you're actually working on, and then ready for review or approval. So a lot of times I'll have a client and we'll be, so your developers and designers will be pulling work from that to-do list instead of being pushed out. So they'll be able to pull more work into that sprint if they're more quickly completing what's in that list. Might see some different variations of these. When I'm on more casual projects, it's, 4 or 5 categories and not many more, or you can go more complex, but pulling up a Trello board is a nice light way to do this. If it's just like very basic and there's something you don't really want to send out to the world, like to everybody, you might make it the minimum desirable product. So Airbnb actually hired a professional photographer to go around and take pictures of units early on, which obviously they can't do now, but doing that for a while really helps people understand what the places look like. So how do you do those things that help you move from a simple site that was just low investment to slowly iterating through agile and building a global product there. So that's what Groupon looked like before. It's like literally hire one student graphic designer, throw an image on there and a coupon thing, and it was totally static. How do you actually just get started with the basics that you need to make it real enough so that you can figure out what is working to scale? This is a lot of info on the going from that top level theme for these strategic initiatives that then break down to epics, user stories, and the tasks that we talked about. So with Snapchat here, we have enhanced user expression. So your epic gets more specific with let's do a mood status. And then that user story where you're putting that hat on, which is really a lot of companies mess up here. And you're like, you don't actually see them write it as a user. That's like a big red flag for a company that doesn't do product management well. But you're like, as a Snapchat user, I want to be able to set my custom mood status so friends can see how I'm feeling at a glance. So that's a lot more powerful than like create mood status feature. Yeah, there's just a ton of different features you can create. And this is kind of the structure that you would actually write for a ticket because you are the PM. It's kind of up to the developer usually on the how, but this is the feature level that they're trying to solve for. Why do we do this? Because if you don't do this, then the developers will write something that doesn't fit the user needs. It happens all the time, even on good teams. You want to help drive that clarity so that they know what to build. And acceptance criteria, as I mentioned, or ACs, as you will see it, they are those conditions that the product must meet. So then you can mark it off as complete, and it's not done until those are complete. So they can build whatever they want until you or your testers say it checks off on those things. So this is what Jira actually looks like. It is the most popular software for writing these development tickets. It's connected to Figma. You can link it there. Like that's an example where it goes right to the designs. You can attach documents and connect them all together. So they have this structure that's hierarchical that goes from that initiative, epic, feature, user story, and tasks are all there. And there's all this reporting and other stuff on that. But this is what you would actually see when you do it. And then there's lots of different ways to set up these timeline views and how you see these things happen across all those sprints. The structure of your team totally varies, whether I'm one of those big companies, a smaller one, and everyone has kind of a different flavor of how much work they're doing in design versus development. You may have front end developer, back end, and leads and juniors. But we have sprints. Usually you're going to see 2 week sprints. It says 1 to 4. One is really too tight. You're doing all of these meetings in 1 week and trying to actually get work done. You're going to kind of run into a lack of time to actually have people do work that aren't status meetings. So that's not really recommended for a 1 week sprint. 2 is fairly reasonable, but you do have to be cognizant of how much meeting time everyone is spending in. And as a PM, you're sort of the guardian of the development team's time. So I kind of recommend that as a watch out because of all of these ceremonies or the meetings that you'll see. Backlog, the list of things to do and how you might prioritize them, and then how that slots in to a roadmap. So you may be receiving all these requests to put things in a backlog from everyone, including the CEO and that sort of thing, but actually getting from a list of things to be done to the roadmap of the things that you will do is different. And some things you just may toss in the backlog and never do. So that's critical to go through a prioritization process to make sure you're building the things that users want that connect with the strategy of the business. These are our different ceremonies. So you have that planning of what you're going to accomplish in that sprint and choose what stories that you're going to pick up. And then you have your daily scrum, and then going through that with the questions of what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and do you have any blockers? Those are the questions etched into all of our minds. The key responsibility of a PM is making sure your team is used to that, especially with blockers. And you want them to come to you as soon as possible with anything that's getting them stuck. So they're not just sitting there doing nothing, or you can call around to figure out what can be done to help them get past that blocker. So the blockers is key because that's your job to escalate that. And then at the end of the sprint, there's a review that's done. Sometimes there will be a share out to clients or to different teams or like executives where you'll review some of the work that will be done at the end, and then the retro. For daily stand up, probably have seen before and maybe on projects as well, where you're having that check in. It does sound really simple. It has a huge value. You can do that in Slack. You can do that in person on Zoom, but the focus is on what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and do you have any blockers and how can we help? And then being really strict on that kind of like 15-minute stand up on everything. You might be actually standing up, but it really helps us stay connected with the team, got a little bit more connection, especially if it's async, trying to find a time zone that overlaps. But that is how we really stay connected. So yeah, Poly's the simple one. This new one I really called Spinach. Couldn't get it past the security review for my company this time, but pretty neat in that they break it all down there. Basically creating a project manager with AI so I can focus on the team stuff and let all that happen instead of typing a ton of notes and editing and wasting my time. So we'll have a lot of cool things like that coming up pretty soon. Before each sprint, you will be doing backlog refinement. So you look at that long list, and then you're actually trying to figure out what to pull into that next sprint, making sure that you've got kind of a feel for the effort and priority based on your users. So one of my favorite things to do as a product manager is a retrospective where you get the actual feedback from everybody. You can do this anonymously, you can do this in person. It can turn into a complaint fest. So I highly recommend trying to think through how to make it productive and reframe things too, because you're all trying to learn and become a super high performing and fun team. And there's a lot of different structures around this, but what went well, what could use some help, and the risks you might see in the future, and making sure your team's listened to and heard and you're getting better each time. So estimation, which I already keyed up there, it's a rough estimate of the complexity or effort required. So story points aren't ours. Here's your connection to reality. They're going to try to do that anyway. And it does defeat the purpose because it's your best guess. And so you want to just keep reiterating that is an estimation and that you can use it as a guideline, but that it should not be super tight on what their expectations are going to exactly match what happens in reality. We did talk about that t-shirt sizing before. This is the Fibonacci ones with the different numbers there. So we can get a little bit more refined in how we put a number on something that's larger or smaller. And they have that split out where it's like when they're tiny, it's like 1, 2, 3, and you can figure it out. But if they're bigger, the difference between a 5 and an 8 is a little bit bigger, and an 8 and a 13 is there. So if you're in a team, some of these are really fun. So you can actually use a tool and you can do this together. Crowdsourcing knowledge and research really shows that if you do this anonymously and then come together as a group, you can get really accurate on what a story might end up taking or what anything is. It even works for estimating how many gumballs are in a machine. If you read The Wisdom of Crowds, that's one of the examples they use. So that also makes it a little fun. So we want to predict how much work we can have in the future. And that's how we do it by week and velocity. Depends where you're at, how firm they are on having an exact velocity and dialing that in. So if your velocity is continually dropping, it's a bit of a yellow flag of, hey, what's happening as a product manager? It is our job to manage that velocity of the team to the best of our ability, what's in our control, and communicating it, even if it's not in our control. The burn down within a sprint is the remaining work to be completed. So you can see this, the planned is the orange one. It's going to be done and actual is there. So we want to be on top of stuff and figure it out before it becomes an even bigger issue as it snowballs along the way. So on prioritization as well, we talked about Moscow method, the examples for Snapchat here, which was another guess. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes on what's important to them and their priorities strategically. Obviously, there's certain things that are musts from a security perspective. There's things that are expectations, and then there's what could be there. And there's also things that just for whatever reason, they're not a strategic priority, or they're just completely off base as well. So that's another reason you might not see them. At the end of the day, product management is just connecting the dots from the vision and strategy of where we will play, how we will win, and then dropping down into real user needs. What are the jobs to be done? Users hire you to do the things they want with our digital products and business services. So what is shiny on a roadmap is not enough unless it's solving real needs. From there, we translate those jobs to be done into features that actually solve something, not just to keep engineers busy developing extra work. That's the through line across all of these concepts, from strategy to story, vision to backlog, idea to impact. And when you get it right, you're not just shipping features, you're building products that people can't imagine living without.